Luke Johnson is chairman of Gales Bakery and Brighton Pier Group. Luke, first of all, just your reaction and your thoughts on that vote last night to basically allow that change to go through, to extend Freedom Day, if it ever does come, to the 19th of July.
Well, a very profound sense of frustration, I think, that the government, on the basis of a very flimsy science, it seems to me, has sustained these oppressive sets of rules. And although some will say, oh, it's only small sectors like theatre or nightclubs or, the way pubs operate, I think it's a lot more than that, isn't it? It's the oppressive sense that our lives are being micromanaged by the government for yet another month. And frankly, the substance of why they've maintained the restrictions feels weak at best.
Yes, and well, new data showing. I mean, again, it's fascinating how there's always new data the next couple of days after the government has been advised by Sage and Whitty and Vallance to go into more restrictions. We had this, didn't we not, in November? And again, we had it in January. Whenever we have a new lockdown, new data always emerges very soon afterwards, showing that actually things aren't as bad as they said they were. But of course, a lot of that new data would have actually been available to those making these decisions. We know that the new variant, we know that, hospitalizations are going up, but only a tiny fraction compared to the cases. We know that the vast majority of people who are getting infections, not necessarily even ill, are young people, healthy people. Those that do go into hospital are younger and healthier, going in for a couple of days, not 3 weeks in ICU. Death rate is pretty much flat, continuing to be flat. Bolton, Blackburn, hotspots, both peaked. We know that the vaccine does work, 90% plus efficacy on the new variant, and yet here we are again.
Yeah, it's very difficult to trust the authorities anymore, I'm afraid, to believe really much of anything they say. And, the science is at best contradictory, and one is constantly having new information that undermines what we've been told before. For example, yesterday you will have read that the government's been presented with a suggestion that the Perspex screens that have been adopted throughout shops and restaurants and so forth are actually harmful because they stop airflow.
Imagine. Anyone who like me has worked in an office for the last year where you have these Perspex screens, so people have to sit sort of diagonally, and the rules are just different all the time. But anyone with half a brain realises how insane this has all been, just looking at these screens. And yet suddenly we've got a report showing this. But this keeps happening, doesn't it? And again, it's like closing hospitality, and then it emerges, only 2.3% of any cases have been related to hospitality. We just constantly seem to, we're on no evidence whatsoever, but a supposition, have massive controls on people's lives, businesses, people's ability to earn a living. And then later on go, so it turns out no. Now, this is the thing. We've got a new document that's emerged. Politico uncovered this yesterday, which shows that Whitehall is looking at the long-term plan, so of what happens after the 19th of July. And we are looking at life really not getting back any way to old normal. Not only working from home being a default right for people, if it is possible for them to work from home. We're looking at self-isolation continuing, probably even if you are double jabbed. So if I've had COVID, I'm double jabbed. I come into contact with someone who's had COVID, I have to self-isolate at home and not get paid. What? Even though I've not got COVID and I'm unbelievably unlikely to have it or to be able to pass it on. We're looking at border controls continuing, not just until July, not just this year, next year, who knows how long. And we're looking at face masks still being required in some public places. When people like me are tweeting and messaging about the fact this never ends, we're not conspiracy theorists, are we? There is, in terms of what the government is looking at, there is no end to these measures.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that too many in government and indeed in public health suffer from this illusion of control. They think that what they're doing is going to make all the difference and that they understand this disease and that we should do what they tell us. And the truth of the matter is, from the beginning, I think, they have overestimated their understanding of it, and they have bossed us around because they have this bias to action.
Yes.
And so they feel doing something is better than nothing, but very often it isn't. And of course, all of it restricts our liberty and makes our lives worse. And when the government gets so intensely involved in the lives of its citizens, as this one has, and pass hundreds and hundreds of laws with minimal opposition, so that democracy is, disregarded. And as I say, you have a cabinet who, for example, have minimal scientific understanding, amongst them no domain knowledge, so therefore not really able to question the scientists. And the scientists all too often, I'm afraid, not really knowing what they're doing, you end up with a mess. And so we end up with lives that are constricted, and we will end up poorer because of all this. And they are sort of thrashing around.
But it's the illusion. It's we must do something. This is something. Yeah. Let's do it. And the public, we are told, according to the polls, public are largely in favour of this. Now, I know an awful lot of people who, really definitely wanted to get out of a lockdown last summer, who were very much in favour of the January lockdown, because they said it's a few weeks to, make sure the most vulnerable are protected. And I said at the time, and I know you said at the time, many of us did, it's not going to be for a few weeks. It's not going to be for a few weeks. We were called conspiracy theorists, COVID deniers, and goodness knows what other names. What a surprise. Here we are, mid-June, few weeks later. And this is the thing, isn't it? This government now it's created this sort of this level of fear. It's created a level of expectation that action could be taken to control this virus, despite the fact that all the evidence around the world showing what NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions like lockdowns, restrictions on people's lives, curfews, things like that, that actually over a year or so, they make very little difference. You can cut infections for a short period. You come out again, they will go up. Every country that has been praised for doing really well has then experienced an upsurge. Countries that did badly, then doing well. The reality is, the thing we probably most need to learn about this is we have very little ability to control a virus. And perhaps we should have accepted that really early on. What do you make of the Dominic Cummings revelations yesterday? Yet another sort of 7,000 word blog, release of these WhatsApp messages from Boris Johnson to him about Matt Hancock and about other issues as well. It must be noted that Number 10 has not denied these messages are the Prime Minister's, which they could easily do. If they were not his, he could deny it. He has not denied it. So I think we can safely say these are not made up messages, despite our lack of trust in Dominic Cummings. But how damaging do you think these are? Or do these perhaps expose what we kind of already knew, that actually there was abject chaos at the heart of government throughout a lot of this period?
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, I would say never ever work with Dominic Cummings.
Yeah.
Any colleague or employee that behaves like he has is clearly, betrayal. It seems to be his second nature. And so nothing he ever says or does is trustworthy. And, I can't believe he will ever get another job in any walk of life again.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it has the ring of truth about it. It shows that there was havoc in government, and that it sort of confirms what we've been saying. They don't really know what they're doing, and they are not qualified to be in charge. The truth is, we are behaving as if we are in the middle of a pandemic, but at the moment, it's fewer than 1% of deaths, and they're not rising fast. And yet other countries that are less vaccinated than we are almost totally unlocked now. Many places in America, for example, yeah, all restrictions of every kind lifted, yet we are still under these, onerous obligations and restrictions, which are for many making our lives miserable. I think a point that was made earlier in your programme is a factor, which is that the government are thinking about enforcing more flexibility about commuting. And if you look at the surveys, I believe that one of the biggest reasons people are in favour of lockdowns is that they're not having to spend money on commuting.
Yeah.
And they don't like commuting. And they think that lockdowns and not commuting go together. And this is very unhealthy, because I don't believe that working from home is necessarily more productive for the country as a whole.
No.
And B, it encourages people to think that lockdowns are somehow a good idea, that giving up all our freedoms is sensible. It's not. It's not working, and it's destroying quality of life. The very essence of life is being gradually squeezed out by the fact that our movements and our behaviours are being so micromanaged.
Yeah. I have to say, any government that is telling people when they can hug or can't hug people, and whether they can dance or whether they can sing. I mean, when the Taliban does it, we are rightly horrified. And I am still absolutely gobsmacked that this country has put up with this for so long, and I wonder how much longer they will put up with it. Luke Johnson, thank you so much for joining us, chairman of Gales Bakery and Brighton Pier Group, former director at Pizza Express.